This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest in this edition is Michael Mickey Ganitch. Mr. Ganitch is a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II and is a survivor of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor more than 80 years ago. In all, he served nearly 23 years in service to our country in the U.S. Navy. Mickey Ganitch was born in Ohio in 1919. In early 1941, at the age of 21, he enlisted in the Navy. But Ganitch considers it more of a creative form of draft dodging.
I joined the Navy January 21st in 1941. I really am a draft dodger because in the fall of 1940, all men were 21 years and older had to register for the draft to go into the Army. I was not 21 yet, but I would be in a couple months. And one of my friends told me, you go in the Army, you could be sleeping outside there and cold food, and so called me a draft dodger. I joined the Navy.
After basic training, the next order of business was to find a job in the Navy Ganitch felt he would be good at.
I went to boot camp in San Diego, and they asked me what I would like to do, and I said, I'm not mechanically minded. I like to do something there that would not require any mechanical aptitude. They said, how you like to steer a ship? I said, that's great there, because up to that time, they're the biggest ship that I saw around Lake Erie, which I was close to, was a ferry boat, and I said, that's for me. So they assigned me to quartermaster and signal school in San Diego, so I went through that before I was assigned to a ship.
As summer turned into fall in 1941, Mickey Ganitch arrived at Pearl Harbor aboard the battleship USS Pennsylvania. In the spring of that year, the United States had already enacted the Lend-Lease Act to aid the British in the fight against Nazi Germany. And relations with Japan were clearly souring as well. The storm clouds were gathering. But officially, the United States was still at peace, and that meant time for some extracurricular activities at Pearl Harbor. Mickey Ganitch had a blast dusting off his old high school football skills and representing his ship against others on the gridiron.
It said, what do you like to do? And I says, well, I'm sports-minded. I'd like to be on something there, somewhere where I could, sports, especially football, because I played 2 years of high school, 1 year of semi-pro, and then I joined the Navy. They said you get on a big ship or a battle or a big station there, usually there's sports teams there. So they assigned me to Battleship Pennsylvania. That's how I got on Battleship Pennsylvania, because I requested a place where I could have sports and plus something that maybe I was capable of doing.
While Ganitch had gotten experience steering the ship, he was also trained to take in the bird's-eye view aboard the USS Pennsylvania and report what he saw.
I was a lookout. That was my battle station. Lookout, report any planes coming, ships coming, or whatever it is. Report it to the controller that would need that information. So on my way up high, where you look a lot further than normally the people on lower down could not see that far. So that's where my battle station was, up in the crow's nest.
When the morning of December 7th, 1941 dawned, Mickey Ganitch was getting ready for battle, but not against Japan.
We were scheduled, I was on the ship's football team. We had a real good team there. I think we had a 9-1 record. The ship would play games on weekends there, and that's when a lot of the activities were planned on the weekends. So we were scheduled to play USS Arizona for Fleet Football Championship at 1 o'clock, December 7th, 1941. That was going to be the Super Bowl of the Navy, and we were looking forward to it there. And my ship was scheduled to leave, the football team was scheduled to leave the ship at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning, do a little scrimmaging, get preparation for that game with the USS Arizona. And 5 minutes of 8, the attack came there, and there was no place to change clothes at that little field that was right close by to the ship. And so we had our football uniform on, and when battle station gone and the attack came there, my battle station was up in the crow's nest, had about 60, 70 feet up in the air. I had all my padding on during the attack. They couldn't hurt me there. I was well protected with all my padding on, except my helmet and spikes there. You didn't have time to change clothes. There was a gap of about 10-15 minutes in between the first attack and the second attack, and that time to change clothes and get in my regular clothes there for the second attack, because there wasn't going to be a game there. So we got out of our football uniform on for the second attack. So I wasn't well protected during the second attack.
Ganitch quickly scrambled up to the crow's nest of the USS Pennsylvania and then had a front row seat as the Japanese planes swarmed over Battleship Row.
Some of those planes flying around were lower down than I was, because the torpedo planes come in low, they drop the torpedo and keep on going. Well, I'm looking down, some of those planes are lower than I was. I'm up 60, 70 feet up in the air. By the time I got up there, ships were burning, buildings were burning there, because just in a couple minutes' time, a lot of stuff took place. My ship actually was the flagship of the fleet. Because we always had an admiral aboard when we went to sea. So whenever we came into port, we tied up at a dock. So the admiral, whenever he wanted to leave the ship, he could just walk off the ship. Some of his other battleships and some of his other ships maybe rode a boat for 10-15 minutes to get ashore. So RHI pretty rank has its privileges there. So normally we tie up at a dock. But 2 days before that, we had propeller trouble. So he put us in a dry dock with two other destroyers, the Cassin and the Downs, and put us in dry dock so they could work on the propellers. They'd get us inside this casemate there and pump the water out, and we're sitting on blocks there. So we weren't in our normal place. The first attack, we did not get hit, but they didn't know that where we were. The Japanese knew where all the ships went. They had the names of the ships. Of course, they had a lot of the names were misspelled and all that, but they knew the schedules and ship. They knew everything there, and they didn't get the word there to their higher ups, the Japanese higher ups, that there was a ship in dry dock. So evidently, some of the Japanese planes reported that there was a big ship in dry dock with two other destroyers. So the second attack is when they hit us as a 500-pound bomb, missed me by about 45 feet. Came on past me, went two decks and exploded, armor piercing. If it exploded on contact, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Wow. But it exploded way below me there. Kind of scary to see a big hole alongside of you. That was the only hit that we got. At the same time we got hit, the Cassin and the destroyer and the dry dock with us there got hit. It started burning, started rolling all over on the other destroyer on the Downs. And it said, flood the dry dock. Only bad thing is that oil from that ship came up on top of water, caught fire and caught flames, and flames all around us, because oil and water do not mix. Because see, when it said flood the dry dock, water all over the bottom, and then the flames got it, and we had flames all around us. It got pretty hot.
When we come back, Mickey Ganitch discusses how the Japanese attack compared to how he and other service members previously expected a war with Japan to begin. We'll also discuss how the USS Pennsylvania recovered and lived to fight many more days. Our guest is U.S. Navy veteran Mickey Ganitch, a survivor of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. I'm Greg Corombos. Veterans Chronicles. We'll be right back. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest this week is Mickey Ganitch, a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II and a survivor of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Just before the break, Mr. Ganitch detailed his memories of the attacks, but he also took time during our conversation to explain how he and other service members thought the war would begin. And while there was obviously widespread death and devastation, Ganitch also highlighted the things the Japanese failed to accomplish that day.
We'd been talking about whether we're going to get in a war with Japan or not, but no one figured that it'd be there. They figured it'd be in the Philippines. So that's where they figured if there'd be any problem, it'd be in the Philippines itself. They figured the water was only 40 feet deep at Pearl Harbor itself. Well, 40 feet deep is deep enough for any of our big ships and aircraft carriers and all, but it's not deep enough for a torpedo. A torpedo needs 60 feet of water. So they figured it's safe from the harbor itself, and the ships in the harbor were safe from any torpedo attack that that could possibly happen there. Japan knew that, so they put some kind of flotation device on their torpedoes so they would sink a lot less than 60 feet, or 40 feet, because they needed a lot less room there with those flotation devices, so they was able to use the torpedoes. Now, up to that time, the strength of the Navy was battleships. We had 8 battleships that were in port. So they wanted to knock out the battleships first. That's why the torpedoes were used, because they feared they'd wipe out the battleships, they'd win the war. Well, they found out later that the aircraft carriers were the strength of the Navy instead of the battleships there. But that was the reason there that they had the torpedo attacks first. Then the bombers came second. And the third attack was going to be hitting the aircraft carriers, the fuel facilities, and the oil tanks there. Well, the aircraft carriers were not in port. Admiral Halsey and his aircraft carrier group were taking planes to Midway and Wake Island there. They were not in port. They were supposed to be in port. Even Japan knew they were supposed to be in port. They knew the schedules of everything. But the aircraft carrier group were delayed 12 hours coming back due to bad weather. And as a result, there's no aircraft carriers were in port there. And Admiral Nagumo of the Japanese fleet said there's no aircraft carriers in port there. We'll not have a third attack. A third attack is going to hit the aircraft carriers, the fuel facilities, and the oil tanks there. So it said no third attack, so they left. If there would have been a third attack, it would have been disaster. Because the closest oil, closest repair facilities, 2,000 miles back to the States there, it would have been disaster. Plus the fact there, up to that time, the women, American women, were to stay at home taking care of the family and taking care of the kids in the house there. The men worked. The next day after Franklin Delano Roosevelt got Congress to declare war on Japan there, blacks, long people lined up trying to join the service. We were attacked there. The country was united. Everybody wanted to get in the service. So that left the women there. So the women started in. They started building planes, tanks, guns, ships, anything we needed there, they made. So between no third attack at Pearl Harbor, and the women stepped in there and furnished us with what we needed, we won the war. Otherwise, I think it had been a disaster.
In addition to attending to the dead and wounded, the military started picking up the pieces and getting ready for war. Ganitch says the Pennsylvania was operational again rather quickly.
In less than 2 weeks, we were on our way to San Francisco because the bomb hit far enough inboard, it did not hurt the watertight integrity, and as a result there, it didn't take us too long to get patched up enough so that we could get back to San Francisco and get ready to fight a war.
The repairs at San Francisco were considerably more extensive, and the crew stayed there for many weeks while the work was done. But once the Pennsylvania was ready to go, Ganitch says it was a workhorse in supporting invasions all over the North Pacific.
I stayed on the Pennsylvania whole World War II. And but we were a slow battleship. It was commissioned about 1915. We could do 15 knots downhill with the tailwind. We didn't have the speed there, so I used this for fire support for the various invasions there. My ship was the invasion of Attu, Kiska, Macon, Kwajalein, and Wetak, Palau, Saipan, Guam, and the Philippines. All those invasions shooting at enemy troops, not shooting at enemy ships there, because we couldn't keep up with the aircraft carriers. So we stayed clear of the South Pacific area, where Guadalcanal and all those places where they needed speed in their ships. We didn't have the speed, so users were likely to help out, and we did a great job there. So when the troops needed support, say a pillbox needed knocking out, or there's enemy concentration over here, they'd let us know there, and the ships would shoot and knock them out. Usually we'd get them on the first salvo. We had a terrific gun crew.
When we come back, Mickey Ganitch describes more of the action involving the Pennsylvania, the most severe damage suffered by the ship, and much more. I'm Greg Corombos, and this is Veterans Chronicles. You're listening to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest is Mickey Ganitch, a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II and a survivor of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Shortly after the USS Pennsylvania was repaired and put back on the water, it headed to the North Pacific, where it was assigned a backup role on one of the most famous missions of the war, the Doolittle Raid on Tokyo.
We didn't even know about it. Because it's so secret. Everything had to be secret on the Doolittle Raid there. They had us way to the east there in case they'd run into problems there. Maybe the Japanese would learn about it there and wipe out the fleet. So we were kind of a backup along. We're a long ways back because, like I said, we're too slow to combat any big ships there. So we were way to the east there just in case they needed us. But fortunately, we were not needed.
But the Pennsylvania's work in the North Pacific was far from done. The ship then headed to the Aleutian Islands to force the Japanese out. But upon arrival, it was the Americans who were in for a surprise.
Kiska, I tell you, though, after taking that too, the next step was Kiska. We bombarded Kiska there and landed troops there. What they found? One dog. The Japanese had left the night before. All they found was a dog, and they didn't say it was an enemy dog or not. But that was the only left. The Japanese were gone, fortunately, and we put a lot of shells there on Kiska itself, but we didn't hit anything because there's nobody there.
The Pennsylvania supported every American invasion in the North Pacific except for Iwo Jima and Okinawa. It missed out on those battles because all the firing of the big guns on previous missions left them damaged and inaccurate.
Overused, because think about all those invasions, every one, and we fired a lot. In fact, there so many times they had some pillbox or some enemy emplacement there was giving us a lot of trouble, and they'd call on us, and usually we'd get them on the first salvo. Some of the other ships there couldn't get them knocked out, and so they called on us a lot. So as a result there, we had a tremendous record there, and we wiped out a lot. And overuse, in fact, there a couple of different times our ship was reported on fire. So many guns being shot there, and you could 12, 14-inch guns shooting broadside there. The ships are going like this there. Used an awful lot, and they figured they didn't need us for Iwo Jima and Okinawa, so they sent us back to the States to get new guns so we'd be ready for the invasion of Japan. They figured they could do without us for that.
Two of the most memorable missions for Ganitch involved the critical and highly successful Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, as well as the harrowing experience of being struck by a Japanese torpedo.
The first invasion in the Philippines there was Leyte Gulf there. There's a big gulf on the eastern side of it, and Surigao Strait is a strait that comes up there. The Japanese fleet was coming up from the south there. We got the word on it there and knew there's coming, so we sent ships, small craft destroyers and all fast ones, way down in there. And it was so narrow there that the Japanese had to be right in a row. They could not spread them out. So 6 of us battleships were back up this way. They're coming up through there. And as soon as they got in range, we wiped out the whole Japanese fleet because we crossed the T, which is a tactician's dream, because the only ship that could shoot at us is their lead ship. We had 6 battleships there, plus cruisers and whatnot in there, and so we was able to wipe them out. I watched General MacArthur wading ashore after he changed clothes there and put on a sharp one. So we came back to the States to get new guns to get ready for the invasion of Japan. We got it all fixed up. This is July of 1945. Next invasion was we already got Iwo Jima and Nagasaki, Iwo Jima and Okinawa back from them. We come back, heading back to Okinawa to assemble with the other ships there. Something happened on the 6th of August in 1945. They dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, August 9th, they dropped atomic bomb on Nagasaki. 3 days later, August 12th, we got in Okinawa. We already got the island back from the Japanese there. The rest of the ships were already in there. 8:30 that night, dark. Japanese plane came with the lights on, aimed its torpedo, closest big ship it saw, Battleship Pennsylvania, my ship. The living compartment of quartermaster's back by the rudder, way back to the back part of the ship. That's where the torpedo hit. 7:30, I had gone up to the bridge to write a letter to one of my sisters. So I wasn't down there. The torpedo hit there, everything went up. I had 26 quartermasters. I lost 20 of them that night. And next morning, Japanese asked for peace. I lost 20 of my own men. We're trying to stay afloat while I signed the peace treaty in Tokyo Bay. They told us in the shallow water in case we'd sink, we'd just sink in the mud. We did sink way down. In fact, you could step right out into the water. We had 19 feet from water line to the top, the deck, the first deck. We sunk that far in the water, 19 feet, the back part of the ship. But they did tell us in the shallow water we was able to stay afloat. They told us to Guam, put us in a floating dry dock there. The war is over. They're already signed a peace treaty because it takes a long time. Tow us 500 miles there from Okinawa there to Guam. So there at Guam there that we recovered what we could of bodies and all, patched us up enough. Now when the torpedo hit there, it wiped out the 2 propellers on the right side. One on the left was had 4 total. One on the left was good and one was not so good. We started back from Guam. We started having problems with that one propeller. They stopped the ship, put divers over the side there, see what they can do with the propeller. Meantime, sharks were attracted by bodies there that's still in the ship. That are still in amongst the wreckage there. So we pulled the divers back out of the water. Put Marines there with rifles, because all big ships have Marines on them. Marines with rifles, so keep the sharks away while they worked on the propellers itself. But I'd like to mention, I got a little bit of time. I'd like to mention there that after the Battle of Midway and all, the turning point of the war, the kamikaze planes were the ones that the Japanese really favored because the good pilots were gone. We're in the middle of Lady Gulf, right above Surigao Strait there. Kamikaze plane hit one of the destroyers, the Abner Reed. Now we're all at battle station and set off for torpedoes. So torpedoes are coming out throughout the fleet. At that time, my job was steering that 33,000-ton battleship. At that time, lookouts reported the torpedo coming from that destroyer. Captain says, hard rudder, steer for that torpedo. Well, I couldn't turn that thing. I turned it rudder as hard as I could. I couldn't turn that battleship. Here comes the torpedo. I see it through the porthole. The torpedo coming on. I got to hold on. It went right underneath us. Evidently, there when the torpedo was launched off that our own destroyer, it was tilted enough. It went a little bit deeper, right underneath. That's kind of scary. There's no place to run.
But Ganitch wasn't done talking about the decisive U.S. victory in Leyte Gulf. He says one of the reasons for the big victory was that the Japanese strategy was stunningly bad.
Well, here's the thing. The Japanese had 3 fleets. One was coming up through Surigao Strait. One of them was enticed Admiral Halsey and the aircraft carrier group to go to the north. That's where Halsey and his aircraft carrier group went, looking up at that's where they thought the fleet was. They didn't know about this other one. So they called for him after they found out where there's a fleet to the south too, but it's too late there. And fortunately there they came through this strait, Surigao Strait, which they had to be in narrow order there, one right behind the other. Like I said, the only one that could shoot at us is the lead ship. They crossed the T, which is a tactician's dream.
As mentioned earlier, Ganitch stayed in the Navy for another 18 years after the war ended. And one of his most intriguing post-war assignments involved atomic testing to better understand the weapons that delivered the decisive blows against the Japanese Empire.
War is already over. They still want to find out a little bit about the atomic bomb. They knew very little about it. In fact, this experience, and they didn't know they had a few experiences there. Los Alamitos down there where they had the testing there, but they still want to know about what effect it have on metals and everything else. The first thing they wanted to do, they already saw what damage they'd have on people. Because at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, now they want to find out what effect it have on metals. So that variety of ships, that Japanese ships, Dutch ships, they had all kinds of them. They have various kinds of metals on it there. They want to find out what effect atomic bomb would have on metals. So the first thing we want to do is say, we're skeleton crew. We didn't have, and we're already damaged there because we still only had propellers on the left side and none on the right there. And so they had this variety of ships there at Bikini Atoll, which is way west of the Hawaiian Islands there. Put the anchored inside the atoll itself. Took us off, all the crews off of the ship and put them on another ship about 10 miles away from, they're going to have an air blast first and an underwater blast. So they put us off in another ship which is about 10 miles away. They said, make sure you're looking away from it, close your eyes, put your eyes over it. I still saw the flash. It was that strong. Now they want to find out what effect it have on animals. So I'm a farm boy, so put me in charge of goats, mice, pigs, and sheep. Put them throughout the ship at various places. I was in charge of that. Put them out throughout the ships there, spread the ships out there, put the atomic bomb right in the middle, underwater blast there. Took us off in another ship. Only about 4 or 5 miles away from it there. This we could watch, the tsunami wall of water come up, and the USS Saratoga aircraft carrier practically standing on its tail because it was in there pretty close to the center of the blast there. All that water came back down on the ship. Now I had to go back on the ship, show them where I put all the animals. And after I showed them where all the animals, they said, okay, throw away your clothes and take a good shower. Your clothes are radioactive. Must not affect me too much because I got 4 children, 13 grandchildren, 21 great-grandchildren, and 9 great-great-grandchildren. I just don't have the $6 million that's supposed to go with all that money. Oh, that was the last effect I had. In fact, I found out later that it told the Pennsylvania to Kwajalein. They tried to wash it off for 2 years. It was still radioactive. It wasn't too radioactive for me to go on and show them where I put all the animals. So they pulled the thing outside the harbor, pulled the plugs, it wouldn't sink, they ended up torpedoing it. It's the bottom of the ocean off of Kwajalein. That's my home for 5 years. But I did find out later also that some of the white mice that I had on there had little ones. Evidently, the atomic bomb must have inspired them to produce there. So we had, as far as I know, we had more animals than it started with.
It's been more than 80 years since Pearl Harbor, but Ganitch says its lessons are still very applicable today.
Main thing is to be friends, have friends. Because it seemed like there throughout the years it seemed like there's a war going someplace. There's something going on, the people not getting racism, everything, various things. If the people just think about the other people, not themselves. We got too many people want to get something for nothing there. They're not responsible for what they do. Friendship is the most important thing. We had enemies too. For a while, Russia was our enemies. Now our friends. Japanese was our enemies. Now our friends are. The main thing is to be friends. To think about the future. You can't change what happened in the past. Think about what we can do for the future. That's why I like to talk to the schools, the kids, the future of our country there. Be responsible for their own action. Be accountable for what they do. They do something wrong, don't be afraid to admit it. When I was young, I did something wrong. I got paddled, so I learned. Next time I knew better there. So be accountable for their action. Don't depend on their mother or father to bail them out for whatever they do there. We have a better world, better people, better country.
Michael Mickey Ganitch is a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II. He's a survivor of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In total, he served 23 years in uniform. In November of 2021, just 2 weeks after this conversation, Mickey Ganitch turned 102 years old. I'm Greg Corombos, and this is Veterans Chronicles. Hi, this is Greg Corombos, and thanks for listening to Veterans Chronicles, a presentation of the American Veterans Center. For more information, please visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org. You can also follow the American Veterans Center on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're at AVC Update. Subscribe to the American Veterans Center YouTube channel for full oral histories and special features, and of course, please subscribe to the Veterans Chronicles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and please join us next time for Veterans Chronicles.